5:30, Mayor. Good to start.
A little bit about our agenda tonight. In a minute, we're going to call for public comment. That's for anything on the agenda. We don't have any public hearings tonight, and now there's only one thing on the agenda. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and open the public comment, item number 2. Anybody that would like to speak to the item on the agenda is welcome to come down. If you'll identify yourself and your address, you'll be given 3 minutes. We'll waive the number of 7 people. No one? We're going to go ahead and move to item number 3. We're going to move 3A. We're going to pull item A. We'll move straight to item B. 3B, review of and discussion on a proposed redevelopment concept for the Lake Point floor site. We have with us tonight Devin Rodriguez, our Director of Community Planning and Redevelopment, and Don Jansen with Planned Community Developers. And I think, Don, you have some guests. Okay. Devin.
We'll do those introductions once I introduce Don.
I understand.
So, good evening. Last year, you all met and decided that the top priority for the city of Sugar Land was redevelopment. And there were 2 sites specifically that were outlined as the top priorities for that redevelopment initiative in terms of commercial redevelopment that you would like to see. Lake Point is one of those. We have a opportunity coming forward that Don will present further about his project. And the purpose of tonight is to get this opportunity out in front of the full council and discussion on our vision for mixed use areas, specifically in Lake Point. And so I'm going to let Don do most of the talking on what the Lake Point project is, but it'll be centered around kind of what is his project, what is his vision, and does that meet the vision that the city's laid out in the land use plan for our regional activity centers, which Lake Point is one of them. So with that, I'd like to introduce Don Jansen with Planned Community Development.
Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Devin. So Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City staff, on behalf of our team at PCD, we appreciate the opportunity to present the initial concept plan for the Lake Point project. I'm Don Jansen with PCD, and I'm here to present on behalf of our group, which the PCD group is made a number of people that have been here for years and years, so we are very familiar with First Colony. But the exciting part about this, it's a new time in Sugar Land. Redevelopment is something new to all of us. So that's the exciting part of this, but we're gonna get through this together, right? So this is kind of a team effort. So Gensler is the is the architect and represented by Tiger Lyons, who will be presenting on the presentation. And he's joined by Blake Coleman with TBG. So our plan for tonight is briefly touch on PCD's history and why that's important. Why are we the developer that's doing this? Discuss our team's planning approach and process to the Lake Point Plaza Master Plan. Present some concept renderings, which is kind of the exciting part of this. And then end with kind of the next steps. What are the steps forward that together we can take? And there'll be time for questions at the end. So before we start, I'd like to answer the question, why is PCD the most qualified developer to be doing this project? So what we've consistently done back in history is been on the leading edge of, let's just say, first to the market developments, forward-thinking, milestone-type projects. So the first one, which is actually a pretty boring project, but the power centers, the big boxes. So in the 90s, they were kind of becoming something. We didn't know anything about them, so we studied them, and we ended up building 3 of them. They were all successful. In Kingwood, we developed a 25-acre site, which was actually their main entry. It actually housed their information center. We built a grocery-anchored shopping center for Randall's, but we added a mixed-use component to it. And Kingwood was going like, well, what, you know? And so we actually had a Joseph Bank and a Pier 1. And so it was our first entree into mixed use. Then we pursued Whole Foods for 12 years. And they kept telling us, we don't do suburban Whole Foods. Well, guess what? We were the first Whole Foods market in the suburbs. And then the last one, which kind of broke all the molds, was Sugar Land Town Square. So Mixed use 25 years ago was something that no one understood. The lenders didn't understand it. Our partner didn't understand it. The market didn't understand it. And so what we had to do was kind of let people understand really you could actually put two uses in one building. You could actually do shared parking and not do individual 4 per thousand, 5 per thousand, 6 per thousand with each use, and it could work. And so we worked very closely with the city of Sugar Land in rewriting zoning requirements. And so what were some of those? Building setbacks, signage, building massing and proximity, combining uses in the same building, like I said, introduction of shared parking, and we brought the conference center and a full-service hotel. We also created the first TERS, hot tax, added business incentives, tax abatement, and other economic inducements to attract Fortune 500 companies like Minute Maid. So as in the past, we're approaching Lake Point Plaza in the same fashion. Align with the best consultants, study new trends, visit other projects to build a best practices model, engage the community through focus groups addressing the needs of all age groups, identify the unserved market opportunities, and above all, have an attention to creating a fun, safe, quality experience for generations to come. So we want to continue to develop legacy projects which will benefit Sugar Land and the surrounding communities. So the next slide actually shows three aerials. And what you're going to see is the one on the left is from 1995, which is actually the Floor property as it was. So you're going to see it, and there's nothing there, let's just say, except Floor. So then the second slide you're going to see is 2004. We bought the 190 acres of Floor property in 2000, excuse me, the 190 that they hadn't developed, and we created Lake Point Town Center. There it is. Thanks, Devin. It's that little arrow right there. Just push that little arrow. And just, it shows kind of the progression on the left. That was 1995. The only thing that's there is really Floor. Then you see in 2004 when we bought it, still nothing there. And on the right in 2018 is when we had fully developed Lake Point Town Center. So what does that include? Residential, a full complement of uses in a very experiential driven format. It's walkable, it's more densified, it has a mixed use configuration, which kind of leads us up to how we're approaching Lake Point Plaza. It's not reinventing the wheel, it's just making that wheel better and adding more things similar to that, but becoming a little edgy in what we provide for there. So we'd like to take a few minutes, if we could, to share our planning process and the initial concepts to date. Understanding the significance of this redevelopment effort, we invited the city departments to our first vision planning meeting, which is the first time we'd ever done it. Usually we go and we kind of plan a little bit and then we invite the city. But we said, why not? Let's get everybody together at the very same time so we start from the beginning. We also never have redeveloped a project in Sugar Land, so we knew their input and ideas would be critical. It was important from the very beginning to start forming a vision with the people with which we would be working the closest. Plus, with a land use plan in place, we knew that Lake Point Plaza needed to be consistent with that plan and achieve the intended results set out for this property. PCD understands this is a long journey and will only be successful if we include all stakeholders. So our design team, as I mentioned, is led by Tiger Lyons. He's the design director with Gensler, who will now share how that vision meeting went and how that has led us to the current plan. As you listen to the process and view the conceptual master plan, please understand these are initial concepts and we're still in the idea generation phase. This plan incorporates all of the significant market drivers we've identified and actually met with that will potentially serve as anchors and provide those destination-oriented uses needed to provide a regional draw. In our minds, we have made headway, but we've really only scratched the surface with products in each market category. Tiger?
Welcome, Tiger.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for having us. And Devin and Don, thank you for the introduction to the project. We're very excited to share the project process and the programming process that we've been going through First, wanted to start off looking back at the initial charrette that we had with the city. And the images at the bottom right of the screen indicate a lot of the thought process and feedback that we were given as a team, some of the things that really stood out, and what the future of this development could potentially be. The vision cloud and the word cloud at the top speaks to a lot of the words that came out of that design charrette session. And so some of the ones that were more prevalent than others was this idea of destination, creating a unique development. And so this really became the first part of our design process, what we looked at and what set the stage for our design development as we move forward. From that initial charrette, there were some key points that tended to come out from the summary. When we looked back at, there was a lot of feedback, as some of those post-its show you. That was only one small portion, but there was a lot of feedback, and so what we tried to do was synthesize that into really some main points. And so what we took away from that was this idea of really creating a unique place with its own identity as being one of the key drivers. Something that you all wanted to be represented was beautiful and something tied in with nature. And so there's a lot of assets already currently on the site that we looked at, and this is a big part of the landscape design and master plan design. But it's really tapping into natural elements and that connection to the surrounding context and the surrounding neighborhoods. Also, the idea of creating a destination for memory, so a place where people can come, create memories. That had to be something that offered a multitude of experiences and a variety and diversity of experiences within the development. And then the last key point was we wanted to create something that spoke to all generations. So it was a welcoming place for people from ages from 8 to 80. And so Gensler's approach really focused on the idea of complete communities. So what that means to us is really this idea of blending commercial, civic, residential, focused around green space and public space. The other is this idea of 5-minute walkability. So the 5-minute bubble, which we'll talk through at a later point in the presentation, is really critical to mixed-use design and mixed-use development. This site is situated perfectly to tap into the idea of a 5-minute walk. Everything's within walkable reach. And so that was a key driver in really the initial master plan concept. And then the final one, as Dawn mentioned, was this optimizing parking. So parking became a key strategy, shared parking use. We really wanted to orient this development towards pedestrian. The vehicle is important, but pedestrians for us is more important in a mixed use and walkable neighborhood. So the idea of limiting parking into strategic locations was a key driver. The future, there were 3 things that we really looked at that the development needed to touch upon as we move into future development. That's a need for density within the development, a sense of pride of place, so creating something that's authentic, and then a plan to evolve. So really this idea of flexibility. So for us, a key focus of the plan was really creating as much flexibility as we can create. Having gone through the last 3 years, we know that that's pretty critical with all sorts of planning elements, because we just don't know what the market's going to dictate. At this point, every year, it seems to change, particularly with office more recently. And then from a design perspective, there were really things we focused on, which was this idea of experience, walkability, creating a safe environment, amplifying and utilizing technology, greater, smarter parking initiatives within the development, more strategically located parking locations, and then this idea of being connected throughout the entire design. So looking, I think we're all very familiar with the current campus. The first thing is really understanding the context, and for us it was looking at the assets that we had to work with. So the current campus has a lot of assets that we wanted to potentially utilize and think about, that being the building being the primary one, but also the context to the lake, the context to the surrounding neighborhoods, the connectivity that's already been established. And one of the key drivers is it's kind of a small thing now, but it's something that we think could really amplify the design in the future, is the parking lot, the trees in the parking lot, for instance, looking at ways to save some of the things that are already on the site, utilizing those within the design and trying to protect those as much as we can. So those became really the infrastructure that we looked at to begin the planning. And the idea was to study, to see what was feasible from the building perspective, what we could reuse, what made the most sense. And that's really where the plan began. Again, this idea of the 5-minute walk, the quarter mile, this bubble really shows you that idea. And from the original campus, you can really get to anywhere on site within 2.5 minutes. So the entire length diameter of this bubble that we're looking at is a 5-minute walk. To the left, you see 2 developments within Houston that we're all probably very, very familiar with. And looking at that, you can see the kind of density that you get in those developments. So it shows within this project, just looking at what we currently have, there's an incredible amount of opportunity for what can be built on site. And the best part is that it's all within a quick walk, and it really lends itself to a walkable environment. From an asset perspective, what we ultimately landed on was not saving the entire campus, but really looking at repositioning 2 of the office buildings of the Flora campus and their amenity cafeteria building. And the idea was there's a market and a demand for office for this. There's potential to utilize existing resources and infrastructure that's already in place. And there's already a central utility plant within this building that we're looking at the feasibility of reusing to create a district cooling and heating for the future development. The other thing is already a very strong infrastructure road layout on the site. So we looked at a couple different schemes where we redesigned the potential road layout, but I think ultimately what we landed on was this radial concept, which utilized existing infrastructure and utilities that were already in place. And then again, on this screen, the green zones that were indicated, these green buffers, are locations within the parking lot where we have these mature oak trees that we wanted to preserve and save. And so those became these green spines that we looked at preserving and ultimately lining the main feeder roads into the neighborhood. These are a couple different schemes and sketches of concepts, and I think really what I'm trying to show here is we studied a multitude of options ranging from saving the entire campus, trying to create as much density as we could, to looking at schemes that saved a partial amount of the campus, so it could be 2 of the office buildings and the main amenity building, all the way to schemes that completely remove the campus. And again, the image at the top right is sort of in a study where we looked at completely redoing the road system and grid system. But again, the team felt that the assets and amenities that were already there, it made the most sense to try to utilize and repurpose what we could. And ultimately, there was this idea of these green diagonals, which again goes back to the idea of saving as many trees and some of the green infrastructure that's already in place, and looking at ways that we could amplify that and really sort of hone in, pulling people into the heart of the project. So out of that study came really 2 ideas that we looked at. So the first being this diagonal grid plan, which again was a complete reconfiguration of the road systems and really only saving the amenity building and the cafeteria of the old campus. We felt that from a development standpoint, it didn't make as much sense as trying to utilize what we already had. So what we ultimately went with was the radial plan. And so the configuration of this, in a nutshell, was an idea of the residential, multifamily, and single family radiating around the mixed-use development, repurposing 2 of the buildings, the office building of the Flora campus and the amenity building, and then creating a central public space, a market hall at the center of the development, and then this idea of the linear plaza that would stretch from the neighborhood all the way to the waterfront. And so that became the backbone to the plan, to the design, and that's currently what's led us to our current master plan, which is, again, a focus on a mixture of single and multifamily, so having variety in residential, and at this point it's very loose, it's meant to be as flexible as possible, but the current thought is that we'd have most of the multifamily kind of towards the south, where we have the hospitality and more of the mixed-use core, And then to the north, where we have more residential existing, is to have more of the single family that kind of fans up to the northern portion of the development. From a development standpoint, I think here, really what we're trying to show is the flexibility in the plan. So ultimately, the market's going to determine what ends up getting built and where. But the idea for us is to provide as much flexibility, and what that's led to is this idea of residential pods that fit within an infrastructure that we've come up with that provides as much flexibility for future development as possible, with an emphasis on public space. So here, the residential is really shown in white. What we're trying to amplify in this diagram is this idea of connecting into the existing trails that are already existing around the perimeter of the floor site. But the idea of bringing this green spine from the perimeter into the project, into the heart of the project, and carrying it all the way from the west to the east and connecting both bodies of water, and being able to provide trail systems and green spaces for the neighborhood to connect to that can then pull them into the heart of the project. And then once you're in the heart of the project, there's this idea of using these three zones within the mixed-use development. The first being this Market Square Event Plaza, which is really at the center, the heart of the development. And then as you move east towards the water, we look at saving kind of the terrace and amenity space of the existing site and utilizing that as a convention center terrace plaza. So that would be basically a double height space where you have retail at the ground level, and then you would have amenities and a public park that sort of folds up onto the second level terrace of the floor campus. And then that public space would then also fold down into what we've developed as a waterfront entertainment zone. So there's this idea of three different experiences within the heart of the project, all connected through green trails and green corridors, with a focus on really pulling public space and this idea of nature through the project. The other thing we've really focused on is the idea of roadways. And so we've developed 4 different variations of this. This slide focuses really on the neighborhoods. There's the neighborhood boulevard road, which is a little bit wider and utilizes those existing trees that we're trying to preserve and save. The one below it is more of your neighborhood connectors, and this diagram is the red road that would be internal. So the idea is to bring the residential tighter, make the streets more intimate, really geared towards pedestrians and the idea of the living street. So while cars are allowed, they're less prominent on these roads as they would be on the boulevards. So getting into our street sections, the first one is looking at this linear park connector. So the idea of bringing people from the external neighborhoods across the water with a new bridge into basically what we're terming a linear park connector that takes you all the way from the west side of the project into the market and the core of the project. And the idea here, what you're looking at on the screen in the middle, is a zone where we would have those existing trees that are in the parking lot currently for the floor campus. The idea is taking those mature trees that are already developed and utilizing them as a linear connector from the perimeter into the heart of the project. It also serves as a great buffer for the transition from multifamily, which would be more of a mid-rise type of development, to your single family to the north. And so this section shows what that might look like, how we really amplify the pedestrian realm, cycling, park connections, while also providing vehicular access in and out of the project. The next street is looking at the connector, a typical residential boulevard. So this again is another zone where we feel like we can save mature trees and utilize things that are already existing on the campus, and then gear it to a little bit more vehicular access and circulation, which is already existing on the campus, to get people to the neighborhoods to the north and to the east. The third road is really the main floor drive coming into the campus. And the idea here is to be more commercial oriented. So this is multifamily mixed with potentially boutique office, could be multifamily on the other side. But the idea is to have retail at the ground floor, activate that experience as you're pulled into the project and into the heart of the campus. And then the final The final street is really this idea of the neighborhood street, which is the smaller, more intimate street. I think these images that surround this exemplify what we're trying to do there. Buffer people from the car and from the street, but provide more of an intimate feeling in the neighborhoods where you really bring the scale down and tighten up those conditions. So taking residential out and focusing more on the mixed-use core, this diagram kind of illustrates those assets that we're trying to protect and reposition or repurpose, and also some of the new amenities that we're trying to bring into the project. So the top image on the top left is really this idea of the market square. That's this red building kind of at the heart, the larger one. The idea could be to have an open market. I think it would be a conditioned space, but it could be a type of building that's open when it's nice outside. It allows the public to flow in. It could be a place where you could have food. You could have different markets, farmer market events. The building to the south of it could be a community event public space. So I think there's a variety of options that could be developed in the core. But at the essence of that space, it's really this idea of the town market and the neighborhood market. And so adjacent to that is this idea of the public event plaza. And so for us right now, we're developing it as a road that can be used from a vehicular standpoint to connect people through. But the way the design of the plan has formed is that you could bollard that, you could shut it down for events, and it could become more of a pedestrian plaza that's extended all the way into the heart of the campus. So again, there's this idea of flexibility in design and a multiple use strategy for that space. In the middle on the left is the idea of bringing a new hotel down to the waterfront and being able to tie that into what we're hoping will be a new convention conference center that's tied into the existing amenity building. And the idea is to connect that hotel in a way that it becomes the anchor that serves that need and that use within the project. It also allows you the opportunity to potentially have a 4-star hotel on a water feature and puts proximity and adjacency to the retail and waterfront district that we're hoping to create on the east side of the campus. The image to the right is a zoomed in version of really an idea of repositioning that amenity asset that's already existing, the cafeteria, and repositioning that into a conference center, a 50,000 square foot conference center that would tie into the entertainment, the retail, the restaurant, the office, the hotel. It really is the heart, the center of the project. And it also ties into future structured parking garages that we have planned for the multifamily and parking adjacent to the hotel. At the bottom left is an image of an idea of what that repositioned office buildings could look like. So that particular rendering is of the top right office building that's existing. Our idea is to basically reskin that building. It has a lot of assets that we think we can use internally and reposition in a great way. It has great bones. One of the things we'd probably want to do is look at recladding that to tie in with the rest of the district and reposition the facade on the outside to work with the rest of the development. So that's showing a concept of how that could be done and how that ties into the waterfront district as well, which is the bottom right image. And the idea there is to have food and beverage on the water, to have access not only from the neighborhoods across the lake, but to basically be centrally located for the 3 hotels to the south and the rest of the development to the west. There's 3 user groups that we've really been thinking about and how they work. The first being local residents that'll be living there. So again, the idea is a residential, multifamily, single family kind of fans and radiates around the perimeter. There's the ability to walk into the core, but really the neighborhood is sort of geared towards the outside. It doesn't mean that residential can't make its way internally. We're showing in this particular scheme a potential for a mid-rise tower that could be residential. But the focus really is on the outer ring, the idea that people living there can walk into the market, they can walk down to the waterfront, they could walk to work, depending on what their daily routine is. The graphic in the middle is more about the office commute. So that's people living there, walking to work. It's people driving. What they're going to be looking for coming in is more parking, getting into work. When you're at work, it's getting down into the heart of the project, the mixed use experience, the access to retail, restaurant, and then also bringing in office that's already developed on the site to the south and providing services for them as well. The final demographic is really looking at visitors coming to the conference convention center, to the hotel experience, to the waterfront, and that focus really comes into the middle of the development and that inner ring. And so these really show kind of the activation that we're trying to hit from all these different demographics, not only people living on the site, but the idea of this destination pulling people and bringing people in. How are they going to experience Lake Point Plaza? This plan and diagram is really to showcase this idea of flexibility in design. This particular one is focused on residential. So the plan to the left is really the current plan that we have, which is showing multifamily really as you enter the project on the Flora Daniels Parkway. And then as you come in, you head north and it's more single family. There are options where the way we've developed these pods is you could bring single family further south. You can move multifamily to the north. You could even tie into existing infrastructure, that being the structured garage that's already in place, and reutilizing assets that are there. That works really well with, for instance, a 300-unit multifamily apartment. That's one option that puts multifamily a little more north. Another option is you could put that multifamily actually in the heart of the project on the plaza, right next to the waterfront. So for us, there's any number of ways that this can be planned, but the idea is that there's flexibility within the plan and the infrastructure that allows these things to plug and play, basically. From a residential perspective, we're not really at a point in time where we've really gotten into the nitty-gritty and the details, but the idea for the residential is to really create a variety of options, whether it's flats, senior living, townhomes, different sizes and scales of single family. This particular project is one our partners, TBG, have worked on in Frisco, Texas. I think this plan shows a really strong concept of green spaces that connect this neighborhood, public places that people can get out into from a neighborhood perspective, but also showing you all these different products and different planning strategies for how you can create variety in the market. So I think moving forward, this would be a strategy and something that we're looking at within the residential pods that we have created, or that within that infrastructure. And this speaks to this idea of really creating variety as much as we can within the development. This is really a rendering of the current plan, and I would say the focus of this, the buildings are all in white, but really the emphasis here is this idea of pulling nature into the project. So going back to this idea at the very beginning from the takeaway, it's really connecting to the neighborhood, the commercial districts to the south, the neighborhoods to the north and to the east, pulling them into the project through pedestrian bridges and those experiences. And then once you're in, the idea of green fingers that sort of permeate throughout the project, but all focused really in on the original campus and that mixed use core. This rendering is actually from the east. So this would be over the residential, if you were flying over the residential neighborhoods to the east, looking back at the campus. So you can see the two office buildings of the current Flora campus to the north. Behind that is the existing structured garage. And behind that would be the single-family residential on the northern portion of the project. The focus of this rendering really, though, is this waterfront district, the waterfront experience. The idea that all these assets, being the office, the conference center, the hotel, and the restaurants, are all on the water. And they're all really radiate around this central civic function and also the destination of people coming into the heart of the project. The other thing you'll probably see is this sort of grand staircase by the office. So that's this idea of the second floor terrace of the existing infrastructure of the campus. The idea of repositioning that terrace to sort of spill down into the public plaza on both the east and west sides. And this idea of connecting the campus with a unique experience. So something similar, I think that probably many of you are familiar with, is the High Line in New York. So the concept is something similar to that, to where you're utilizing the infrastructure that's there to shade during the day for people that are on the first floor, and then repositioning the opportunities to utilize that terrace on the second floor. This rendering is now flipping to the opposite side. So this would be from the west looking back. This is looking at that market at the center of the project. So as you come in, this is really the experience everybody sees up front and center. You have the main public central space of the development, and then residential is to the east and to the north. And then the idea, again, we're looking at a repositioned facade of the office of the Flora campus on that northern central part of the rendering. And then potentially the idea of having these podium mixed-use residential type developments where you could really activate this development at different levels. So not only the ground plane, but at the second floor and at podium level development. And then finally, we've been looking, I think the idea of connecting to surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding environment's important. So we've looked at ways and opportunities to really amplify that experience as you come in, not only through a vehicular on the main bridge, but the idea of really trying to activate future bridges within the pedestrian realm, tying into parks, landscapes around the perimeter of the development. So currently, that's one of the things we're looking at from a design perspective, is how we can make that experience more meaningful as you come across the water. And then I think finally, Don, probably invite you back up to talk through the next steps. Currently, this is where we're at, but I think Don's going to present kind of where we're planning to go and what the next phase of design development will be for our team.
Thanks, Tiger.
Thanks, Tiger. Appreciate it. So I think the process going forward is just to learn about what people want out here. We use the term live, work, play a lot. But so what do we need to provide for people to want to live, work, and play right here? And I think you do that by having focus groups of not just the older people, but the younger people, and get a good, just kind of a good feeling of what everyone would need, whether that's housing, whether that's dining, is it a place to eat, a place to have a drink, it's all of those things. And so you only do that by having conversations. And so you engage with the community to do that. We've already identified a lot of people that have called us. I know we had a press release today, so we got a lot of phone calls, which was kind of fun. And so people that we've already identified that we've met with, the conference center and convention center operator that wants to do potentially an exhibition hall, which is kind of a conference center with an exhibition hall to kind of lend itself a little bit to a convention center. We have 2 4-star hotels that have called us, and the primary reason they called us was because of the water. So they have this vision of, great that there's a conference center, but how many people come to Sugar Land today that want to have a staycation? Okay, I don't know. But in this particular case, with the water and all the amenities and all the dining, they see this as being an opportunity to really be business, conference center, but also attract those people that would want to come out for a kind of a one-of-a-kind experience. It was really exciting, people that wouldn't normally come to Sugar Land. Talked to multiple restaurant operators that want to do different concepts. Some of them are already actually in Sugar Land, and they, if we kind of go back through time with Sugar Land Town Square, we've kind of morphed from where we were when we developed this project to where it is today. It's a changing environment, the demographics, and so it's a guy that has experience out here that's kind of lived through that really understands our market, rather than somebody that's coming to Sugar Land new and fresh and not really understanding our market. So his concept is 3 restaurants with gardens that kind of would connect everything. You can sit in the gardens and go to any of the restaurants. You can get a drink at one and walk anywhere you want. So it becomes this, it's a dining experience, but you can actually walk around, and it's the mobility, walk down to the water and enjoy that. We have a high-end experienced senior living operator that would be it would be mid-rise. It would be a 9-story and a 5-story. Multiple luxury multifamily groups, office prospects. The only reason why that Tiger mentioned potentially saving a building, which I think that's pretty low on the probability after running the numbers with recladding, and it's almost cheaper just to rebuild, which is probably where we'll end up. But it's a biomedical research group that really likes the A building, which is the building on the right. They like the proximity to the water. They actually like a large floor plate, which in this office market, that's why those buildings are so hard to lease. They're 40,000 foot floor plates. In Town Square, the typical size is 25,000 square feet. So it's just not something that a lot of people want, but we're going to explore that, and there might be more people just like them. And then a concierge-focused wellness center. If you're familiar with the Cooper Clinic in Dallas, very high-end, kind of an experience that is on an 8-acre campus. I'm not saying that's what would be here, but once again, we're attracting people that want the high-end, they want the amenities, they like the water, and so why not capitalize on that and bring those people to Sugar Land? We're actually teaming up with the JLL, which Jones Lang LaSalle, which is a worldwide full-service real estate group, to do the medical and the retail research. So we're going to have them do a deep dive into those two actually industries, just to say what's the depth of our market and what is some of the new medical and retail products that we can bring. So we want these to be destination-oriented, themed type of, let's just say, enhancements. We're talking about a beacon theme. What does that mean? Well, we're not on 6 or 59, so that's a disadvantage. But how can we do things to call people's attention? So if these beacon and these lights that project up through during the nighttime hours, people look over, they see it. So people like light, they like sound. So we're looking at creative ways to do that. From a residential standpoint, we're looking at everything. I mean, we have actually a residential builder that's also an architect. So we went on a tour of their product in town yesterday, and they took, okay, I'm not saying we're gonna do this here, but 16,000 square feet, and they put 4 units in it. Now they're 3 and 4 story. They also have a porch concept. They also have all these different products that basically what you're doing is bringing the resident closer to the streets. You don't have the front yard. You'll have a sidewalk. You kind of connect everyone, you engage everyone, you open your door and there's people walking, and you would say, well, maybe that doesn't feel safe. I'd rather have a gate around my community. Well, actually, the studies are showing that to be engaged with people and have 15 people walking, someone in a stroller, having a cup of coffee, you actually feel safer. And you actually are engaged with the community. You're talking to people, and actually might get to know your neighbor again, which would be kind of a new concept. So we're just looking at ways to do that. The multifamily, if we did any multifamily, which we will do some multifamily, will be styled after the Pearl project. So it's only going to be structured parking, highly amenitized. It's not going to be the same old that you've seen. So going forward, what we recommend is to continue to do what we're doing. Work with the city, work with you, go on some trips, look at different projects that we've seen around the country, kind of like we did with Town Square. When we had the idea of Town Square, it really wasn't our idea. I know that might be a shock to some of you, but we just kind of were great at copying and taking other ideas from people that had been there before. So we went to Reston, Virginia, went there, fell in love with it. And so we took kind of, from a best practices standpoint, what's good about that, and we brought it to Sugar Land. We want to do the same thing here. So anyway, we appreciate your attention and your time. We're excited about this project. We're open to any questions you have and look forward to working together on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Tiger. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to council, and if you got the experts here. So, I, for one, having seen this, and I got a little bit of a preview Devin and I did yesterday, and this is, from my perspective, this is pretty exciting. It gives flexibility to have different kinds of space, but it's definitely highly amenitized. I think the landscaping, I think the more or less what I call the common areas are something that I think the community would embrace. So with that, questions? Suzanne?
Thank you, sir. Don, this is probably for you. But first of all, I'm going to commend you on the work you've done for reaching out to everyone and including them, listening to them. This is extremely exciting. I think this is what we were looking for when we said go out there and bring back something we haven't seen, something that is going to last forever, and something that's just unique and beautiful. So thank you for all your work, staff and you. So this is fabulous. A couple of questions that I have. Looking at this, you did talk about some of the examples of residential. This doesn't really show us what those are, but you mentioned that. So what types, you were talking about cottage housing, live, work. Can you just elaborate?
Sure. So that's not my specialty, but so we're looking at pretty much anything and everything. Everything's on the table. What you see on this drawing is just a bunch of squares. That's actually a 10 per thousand. 10 per acre density. But we're looking at 20 per acre, 30 per acre, which basically it's smaller units. So you don't compromise the quality. You just say, okay, not everybody can afford 800,000 to 1.2 million, but you could afford something that's 2,000 square feet that is more of an empty nester type product, a young professional. So how do you do that? I mean, Gensler has a gazillion different ideas. Like, for example, there's ones where they're outward facing, say a townhome or a condo that's facing the street. Like if you look at the example, see the red activities building? So actually the Partners in Building guy we talked to said, you know what, I want to live, right, he's the president of Partners in Building, CEO. He said, I want to live in that unit that's right across from the Market Building. I went, really? Why? He goes, well, first of all, there's no fence around me, and so I'm right up close to the market center, and I can see myself walking over to a farmer's market on Saturday. I can, if there's a coffee shop, or I call it the drug commercials. I know that sounds funny, but you know, all these drug, and you see it's like the perfect world. I mean, you're walking into that going, that doesn't exist. But I mean, if you could have something like that, he said, I'm seeing something that I want to go experience. So what is that product? It could be 3-story, it could be 4-story, it could be, I did mention the cottage where you put front porches, so you're kind of real close to the people walking. The driveways in the rear, so that you don't have any, basically you don't have any cars in front of the townhome, condo, live, work, whatever it might be. So our goal is to go explore all these products with professionals. We've met with 5 of the, I would call, very experienced builders that can actually give us ideas, and even invite all them, this is interesting, but invite all of them together as stakeholders. Like our next meeting, our next vision meeting, the people on that list, we're going to invite all those people to a meeting and let everybody share their ideas, because everybody's coming from a different perspective. What works for the 4-star hotel operator, okay, we don't think like him, but he does. And so he inputs. And then you have these people that have all these residential options. They input. Office people. So at the end, you're not like, okay, I got to go sell this to somebody. They've been with you the whole way. And so your project is really a demonstration or the result of all these people, including the city council, whoever it is that wants to participate. And it will be, I think, much more successful if we do. So I don't know if that answers your question really well. We're going to find those people that do and go find those products.
Follow up?
Oh,
That's perfect. We were looking for the diverse middle housing. I think you're touching every demographic and need, and that's fabulous. The other part of my question is, what is going to determine where you put the multifamily as far as the residential versus multifamily? Is that input from the residents, or is that something how do you determine that?
So there's 2 schools of thought. One is the plan that you see, it's more the entry. Okay, you kind of put it at the main entry and you put retail at the bottom. Another one is to bring it, and Tiger showed you the other version, you pull it into the plaza. Because I don't know if you're Rice Village, that Hanover has a project that's it's got a little open area, and right in front of that there are 3 restaurants, Cyclones and a couple of others. So it's all interconnected. So you bring the people into the activity. So I honestly don't know which one. I think a couple of focus groups with people will say that, and it could be 2 different ones. I mean, it could be one at the entry, it could be one on the plaza, so it's 2 experiences. So I don't know really answer that, but I think that we want the needs of the people and their desires to drive what we do.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Carol.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I really like the waterfront features and the bridge concepts.
Good.
And
Thank you.
I also, being a tree lover, really appreciate that you're trying to protect as many of the beautiful trees as possible. So is that building, the tall building in the center, is that what you said is the hotel?
That's a condo. It's actually a
that's-
high-rise condo.
Oh, that's the condos.
Mid-rise, we don't have anything high-rise out here. But I mean, it's a mid-rise condo that, it's interesting, architects draw things that they don't have to pay for. So, anyway, that's a building that but anyway, I'm just kidding a little bit. So that's meant to be a condo with flats. That's kind of the thought. But that could be anything, honestly.
Don, I think the orange building down on the wharf is the hotel, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more on the water. That's kind of what they want. They want to be on the water, connected to if there's a conference center, kind of connected to that. So,
Okay, well, that's good. I've heard from some empty nesters that they would really like to, downsize and have lower maintenance and have a lock and leave, but they would like to put their equity from their house into a condo.
Sure.
So I think we definitely have a place for a condo. And then also there's some young professionals, with some higher incomes, and they'd like to also put their money into a condo instead of a multifamily. So you are talking about approximately 550 units of multifamily, and this is in addition to the Pearl then?
I don't really know yet. I mean, I think the market's going to tell us that. I mean, the honest answer is I don't know. I think there's going to be 3 projects in here. I mean, actually, we've talked about some people that, okay, am I being recorded here? No, I'm just kidding. So maybe like 120 units. I mean, they're smaller, more boutique, and that maybe there's multiple smaller. So you kind of break this big monotonous these buildings into smaller units. So it doesn't really actually look like this overpowering multifamily project. There's actually, Gables built one in town that's got, it's the same multifamily owner, but it has 4 different looks. So you actually think it's 4 projects rather than just one big one. So I think, once again, to Suzanne's point, we're open to looking at new products. What does the market want? What's the price point? And then deliver that in a way that kind of works and fits within all this. I know that's not really a perfect answer to your question, but we're just exploring all those options.
Don, that's
Thank
what they actually did, the Pearl in San Antonio.
Pardon me?
With the Pearl in San Antonio. I mean, that's the way they approached it too.
Right.
You've got smaller projects and they don't look like apartments. That's what they are.
Yeah. I mean, you can disguise what is an apartment, I mean, you really can, to make it look like it fits in a neighborhood and not be what a traditional apartment has always looked like. So that's our goal.
Stuart? LaShawn?
Thanks, Mayor. Don, and very, very good job on the presentation
Thank you.
and bringing it out. I appreciate all the details that you all have put into it so far. And just echoing what Suzanne said, badly needed in our city, and I know you're already talking to a lot of different potential folks, is Trader Joe's. We hear about it all the time. You brought Whole Foods to a suburb. You said it earlier. Help us bring it to Sugar Land as well. Start talking to them if you haven't already.
You're the first person that's asked me that
I'm
question.
sure. Yeah, right.
You're the 1,000th person it's really interesting. So 6 months ago, I'm laying in bed and my phone dings, and it's a survey from Trader Joe's. I mean, just out of nowhere. So of course I said, I responded 15 times, just kept, But that I would love to create an environment that they want to come in. So we're actually talking about, in fact, Devin is from where Trader Joe's is, to go out there and just go visit with them and say, hey, what does it take to come to Sugar Land? Whole Foods did, and they weren't going to come here. What does it take for you to come here? So
I figured I'm the 1,001 person, but I wanted to make sure I
exactly,
said it.
exactly.
Because we're being recorded.
Yep.
Creek Bend, that street right now, is that the one in front of, that takes you to the Hyatt Place and all that when you turn right off of Flor Daniel? Is that Creek Bend?
Yes, that's correct.
That's a horrible street. I'm assuming we'll be able to widen it because we have people going down the wrong way, leaving Milano at after parties and stuff like that. That street is 1 lane on both sides.
Yep. So that's not really our focus, but it can kind of become our focus, I guess. I mean, in this whole plan, because our plan doesn't really include to the south because that's land that we already own and have developed. But I think that the beauty of this process is you can kind of capture the whole peninsula, which is really 53 plus 20, plus 28, and come up with a plan. I mean, I think if you went to these people and suggested that, I mean, I think they'd be in favor of that. I mean, it just betters their community, but we don't really have total control over what they do.
I understand, but then staff
But I understand, yeah,
can
yeah.
definitely help us work on that. So
Absolutely.
those are two things. Mayor, I've got one more. I know Mayor mentioned lots of green space. I kind of see it a little bit differently. Maybe there's not enough green space. Is there enough? I know you've got 4 acres or so for detention set aside, and just green space is needed because we're going to be filling in more and flooding and all. So I just want to make sure I put it out there. I know you're going to do your due diligence and everything else. That's it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Jennifer?
Yeah, Trader Joe's was my question. It's because the nearest grocery store is going to be Whole Foods, right? So just the ability to get around there and get access to a pharmacy and those types of things. So by Sugar Lakes, the road coming in off of 59, we have a bike lane situation, which kind of takes up one lane. So I guess that would be my concern, probably with traffic coming in and out of this area. I kind of like the idea of the residential being on the outside so that they can, have easier access to get out into the community to go to get gas, go to the grocery store, get the car washed, and all those types of things. I like the idea of having a taller structure to provide shade over a kind of a farmer's market area. That was pretty interesting to me. One situation, I think it's in Memorial City, is where they have a 4-star hotel with some flats on top.
The Zaza? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if we wanted to do like I don't know, it's just an idea that I had. I thought that was pretty cool, where you had, the hotel in the middle, restaurants on the bottom, flats on the top, in one
Green space,
in
where
one
they kind of
structure.
painted the mural on the side of the garage. Is that what you're talking about?
It's right over there, Memorial City.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So anyway, I think it's pretty exciting. I think this area is really fitting for what we're talking about with a regional activity center. It's really set up, and always wanted a river walk here in Sugar Land, like San Antonio. We can put Christmas lights all around it, but I appreciate all the work that you've done on it, and it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Great, thank you.
So Don, as I look at this, I see one big miss in this plan. I see all the green space. I'd love to see more. I see all the residential, and I see retail. I see the farmer market. I don't see any pickleball courts, and I think you're setting yourself up for an absolute nightmare.
Understand.
That's the big demand. I know they're going to fit in there somewhere. I had to throw that in there just for the mayor in case he forgot about pickleball.
Yeah.
So I
Flores.
do know, Don, this is all in pencil right now. I love that. This is a time for the people to just fill the airways with ideas and excitement. Everybody's always concerned about mobility. Everybody wants to come and go as they please and in a timely manner. So we know that ultimately these are things that are already on your mind. I do appreciate the presentation. It gives everybody an opportunity to start. It's kind of like you're stimulating thought or thinking, and so I am excited, and I bet that pickleball is going to look pretty amazing.
So actually, this group called, and it's called Pickle and Paddle. You know what paddle tennis is?
I want to know.
So paddle tennis is a combination of handball and pickleball. So you have a plexiglass wall around you. So if you miss the shot, which you probably would never miss,
Never
but
miss.
if you did,
Yes.
and goes past, it would actually hit a wall and bounce back.
Okay.
So it continues.
Wow.
So
See, you're already
just
thinking
saying,
for that.
Well, they called us, and they're franchising this across Texas. And I think it's a cool idea. It's just kind of like, where do you put it? So, but it's just kind of putting things in that would be amenities that people would want.
Well, I know this is a
Next to
big.
the orthopedic surgeon who gets all the business from the pickleball. Yeah.
This is a big ask, but nobody ever brings up the old Astro World. Sooner or later, somebody's got to bring an amusement park back to our area. So maybe fit a roller coaster into this thing. Who knows? It's still in pencil. Thank you, Don.
You're welcome. Thanks for your comments.
Look forward to what you're going to bring next time around.
Sounds good. Thanks for your time.
Thank you,
very much.
Devin.
Appreciate it.
Item number 4, City Council City Manager reports, 4A City Council Member reports. William, we're going to start with you.
No report, Mayor.
Suzanne? No report, thank you. Stuart? No report, Mayor. Jennifer? No report. Nishan?
No report.
Dare I ask, Carol?
Well, peer pressure. If nobody else is giving a report, I won't give one either, so.
All right, city manager report, Mike.
No report, Mayor.
This time we're going to go to item number 5, closed executive session. 5A, section 551087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations. And item number B, 551072, deliberation regarding real property. At this time, we're going to go ahead and recess into the council dining room. Thank y'all for coming tonight.
I want it here so everyone can look at it. How are you? Good to see you. Good questions. And this is exciting. I'm excited. So the first focus group is going to be your neighborhood. I'm serious. I'm absolutely 100%